Welcome to Daily Meditation with Sangha Live.
I hope you can see me well and hear me well. I'm still kind of improvising conditions, and related to that is the fact that at some point the technician should come, and my partner is here, so it should be fine. But maybe they'll call me for a second. I don't know. So just so you'll know, yeah, it was kind of an inevitable hour, like sometimes with these things. In any case, I really hope you're well, and I'm looking forward to exploring a little bit more around the theme of equanimity that we're visiting and revisiting and looking at this week. So I said something yesterday, and today in the morning I woke up and felt, maybe there is something a little bit inaccurate in how I said it. And what I said is that the worldly winds that the Buddha mentioned, so pleasure and pain, gain and loss, success and failure, fame and shame, or blame, they will blow. And the only question is, how much are you kind of exposed and vulnerable in a way to these winds? And I will say this, these winds of the world, they will impact everyone at different times, and there is no way of living in the world without being impacted by them. However, how much they blow and how they impact is not a static thing. There is a kind of participation from the side of the heart and mind that makes it so that sometimes they blow harder and you experience them more dramatically. And sometimes the heart and mind, or we, in a way, kind of attributing agency to a kind of we, we'll get to it, but for now, let's say this, we can teach the heart and mind to feed a little less, to nourish a little less the conditions that causes this kind of the rigidity of the appearance of the world and its winds. We can make our heart and mind such that the relationship with things makes the winds softer, or makes them be experienced in a softer way. The heaviness of them, the strength of them it's not a static thing. It's not just a given. There is some actions that the heart and mind is doing that don't only makes us more vulnerable, but makes the experience of the winds more like this. So I would say it's a really important question from the side of compassion, what the heart and mind are doing that makes these winds feel so much stronger, and what the heart and mind are doing that may dissolve the power of them, or some of the power of them, or their impact. One movement that the heart and mind are doing kind of by default that makes the worldly winds feel incredibly strong and impactful is the creation and the belief in a self. Now, the sense of something here as a location of experience is something that is rare to go beyond. It's very rare to go beyond that, really, really, all the way. But it's not a binary. Sometimes the self sense can feel so kind of there, so solid, sometimes so much softer, so much more flexible. And we can learn to see this spectrum, feel this spectrum, and travel on this spectrum to slowly teach ourselves to make the sense of self more and more flexible, open, malleable, and to incline in that direction whenever we want, knowing that there will be probably a default tendency to create a more solid and a kind of sense of separate and in opposition sense of self, a thing that bumps into other things, a self that fights with or struggles with or sometimes cooperates with other selves. An obvious example of such a movement, a relatively obvious place on that spectrum, is the place of placing blame on oneself and on others. And that's a very intuitive move. I sometimes think that the real Four Noble Truths that people go by are not the Four Noble Truths of the Buddha, of there is suffering, there is a cause for it, there is a possible end, and there is a way out. But actually, the Four Noble Truths that people go by are there is suffering, someone has to be guilty of that, it's someone's fault, but it can't be me, so it's probably you. You know, a very different set of thinking. And actually comparing these two sets of Four Noble Truths tells us something about what the Buddha actually suggests. The Buddha suggests focusing on in, actions, focusing on actions versus or instead of focusing on selves. So if something undesirable or painful or difficult happens, it can be very easy for the heart and mind to go and, all right, it's either my fault or their fault. And in that, there is a kind of creation of sense of self or a sense of self of another that's to blame. Now, usually what that does is just add more reification, solidity, a sense of separation, and a kind of sense of pressure towards oneself or towards the other that things will somehow be otherwise. Does that work? I mean, maybe a little bit sometimes, but is it a reliable kind of solution? Something difficult happens and pointing to a self, either of another or of myself. All right, I'm so stupid. I really need to try so much harder. I can't believe I did this. You know? I can never do this again. I wish I wouldn't do that again. You know, fine. I think there is something sometimes true in that. But it's not necessarily done in a wise way when there is a kind of self-blaming and pressure. Regret has a place, but regret, unlike blame, is again focusing on actions versus focusing on selves. In one of the chapters of Seeing That Frees, and in some talks, Rob suggests the possibility of looking at results that came up not in the way you wanted them to, and then reviewing the causes, the reasons for such emergence, but not doing that in terms of you or me, but doing it in terms of conditions. And that implies also actions. And in order to be a little bit thorough, he suggests to do that in terms of conditions from the past, from the present, conditions that are outer, and conditions that are inner. Right? And it's a worthwhile thing to review one's actions from this perspective, or to view results and unfoldments from this perspective again and again, to make it a habit of mind. Now, it may not sound like much, but it actually makes quite a big difference. You can kind of think, and I'm sure it will be different for different people. You can think how much of the difficulty in my life would have been prevented or softened if, instead of blaming myself or blaming others for things that happen, I will look at the web of conditions, the web of actions, with eyes of compassion, and asking myself, all right, what are the conditions that participated in this? Some of them you may be able to change gradually over time. Some of them maybe not. Many of them probably not. But from the beginning, you're coming in with an angle of compassion, of forgiveness, and of more wisdom. This blaming thing is not only painful and rarely helpful, it's also not really wise or true when you're blaming self and other. Like, notice the movement of the inner critic when you blame yourself. It tends to be quite repetitive, and it tends to tell you things about yourself that it's not only that you already know them, you exaggerate how true they are, and they're kind of inert sense of who and how you are. They're not necessarily dynamic or very revealing or very true. So, way more compassionate and way more helpful to consider things in terms of conditions, inner and outer, past and present. Let me give you a very small example. So, yesterday evening, I wake up every day at let's say around 5:30, or sometimes trying earlier than that, in order to have a little bit of practice time before the day begins. If I can, more than a little bit. And, yeah, and often I insist on it. But anyway, that's another thing. And I had a fantasy that yesterday I'll go to sleep relatively early. And you can see from my hand gesture that didn't really happen at all. Now, in the tiredness and in the stress there, I could notice the tendency for pressure to arise towards myself or towards my partner, kind of saying, how did this happen, with a slight kind of, and it's kind of your fault. Or how could I be so kind of, it has to happen differently next time. Yeah? And this pressure, with a little bit of kind of, it's either you or me, created a kind of unpleasant situation. It's a very small thing. It's a very small thing. I have done the practice of considering the present and past, outer and inner condition with regard to huge things that I carried quite a lot of blame around, and that really helped to dissolve them. But I'm giving this tiny example. So this morning, just looking at the conditions, which were very obvious, right? Conditions from the past. There is a little bit of a habit of going to sleep a little bit too late, and you can say, yeah, this is me, I'm just like that, or she's just like that. But it's actually just a habit, and habits are not self. You cannot look at the habit and say, this is him. It's a habit of mind. It's a movement that was trained again and again. The mind just goes there, does that, right? There are outer conditions. So outer conditions would be the fact that we are in a very new place and there is a lot to take care of, and we cannot really be at ease because so many conditions are just kind of not really settled. And there is also the kind of interesting outer condition of there is the light here. It goes on so late. It just continues and continues and continues. There isn't a sunset like ever. I mean, at some point there is, but it's much later than we're used to. So there is that, and a very obvious thing, but it does impact the kind of dynamic. And of course, there is the fact that my very young daughter, of a few months old, was awake. And of course, there were some things maybe we could do, but she was very much awake, so the conditions were very obvious. And still, with these obvious conditions, and of course, there are more I can speak of, with these obvious conditions, and with this very minor thing, kind of blaming self and other just tends to arise. And it's really good to kind of sit back and contemplate the conditions that were there. Now, that doesn't mean you're not responsible for anything. And from now on, you're just going to say, I mean, conditions, I don't know, just conditions. Of course, you sometimes need to take responsibility and say, yeah, I'm sorry, it was my fault. But, and with yourself, you can really take that in when that's appropriate and consider the web of conditions so you have a view of what was not in your control and what maybe you can kind of encourage more towards the future, even in the present, towards that future, but take away in a way the weight of pressure on the self. And similarly, of course, with another. All right. So this is just a very short reflection. And this thing, I know it kind of doesn't sound like much. It sounds like a kind of funny word of advice. But the transition from thinking in terms of self to thinking in terms of actions can be, or actions and conditions, can be so incredibly relieving, so incredibly helpful, and so useful. All right. In the meditation now, I will invite an approach that is reducing the pressure or the negotiation with experience to be as you want it to be, and invite and encourage a sense of, I mean, it's not meant to serve me, and there is no need to negotiate with it so much. There is a kind of like, huh, huh, and maybe even a little bit of a reduction of the investment in things being this or that way. Now, this reduction of investment, it may sound like you're kind of disappointed. And maybe there's a little bit of that sentiment, but it's actually a quite blessed disappointment. The world of experience is so much more beautiful and so much more free when there is a less kind of pressuring and a kind of testing of it and a forceful attempt to compose it around what the sense of self wants and doesn't want. So we'll sit with that in a very light way. So please find your way to a posture that works for you. You can practice sitting, standing, walking back and forth, or lying down. See if there's anything you can do to make the posture a little bit more supportive. And supportive here means that it gives you a good basis for your body and also allows and invites your body to be upright and open. Then you can relax unnecessary tension in the body. Begin by scanning it intuitively and relaxing whatever is tense and can be relaxed. Then you can scan your body a little bit more systematically, starting from the top of the head, touching and relaxing there. Inviting the awareness downwards, the back of the head and the forehead. To the area around the eyes, relaxing there, down the face, around the mouth, into the jaw, down the throat and the neck. Into the shoulders, the arms and the hands. Then back to the base of the skull or the back of the neck, and all the way down from there, down the spine. Relaxing all through the spine. Then relaxing the right and left parts of the body, sorry, of the back. Then in and around the tailbone, down the legs and the feet, touching and relaxing there. Touching and relaxing the belly and the chest. Then again, reviewing the whole body, noticing if there are other parts that can be relaxed and relaxing them. Then make yourself sensitive to the whole body. So your awareness and sensitivity surrounds the body. It can be a little bit wider than the boundaries of the physical body. And it can feel the body. Holding the body in awareness and sensitivity. And it's worth cultivating just a little bit of goodwill, or reminding yourself the goodwill, the kindness, the friendliness that's in the background of your meditation that guides all your small choices and actions in your practice. Perhaps there is a kind of bodily or heart sense of that. And you can also remind yourself this direction with the phrases. Goodwill towards yourself, towards people that are close to you, and towards neutral people, perhaps even challenging ones. Then make yourself sensitive to whatever experience feels prominent, whatever is easy to notice. Could be a bodily sensation or a sound, anything really. And for a while, just come close to it with your attention. Coming close really doesn't mean that you need to lose touch with the sense of the whole body. Sometimes the sense of the whole body can actually help with that. So the awareness is quite wide and light. And it can come close. It can approach and touch this or that experience. First, just receiving the sense of it, however it is. And you may sense that when approaching an experience, while there will be aspects of it that will be pleasant and aspects of it that are less so, and with it, a kind of pressure can be built. A kind of demand in relationship to the experience. See if you can relax this pressure, if you can relax this demand. Broaden, soften your attention, soften your body. And if it feels right, you can pick up this as a way of looking, a way of relating, not demanding. And particularly not demanding that this experience will be as I want it to be. Rob's suggestion here, following the Buddha, is to see this as insatisfactory. Which may or may not be a good word for you. It clarifies the approach. Or again, you can think about it as reducing demand. That it will be pleasant if it's unpleasant, that it will be more pleasant or will stay if it is pleasant. Reducing demand. Not very different than welcoming it to be as it wants to be. So there are these angles. See what works for you. How will you know? It relaxes something. The experience may stay as it was. Maybe it's unpleasant, maybe it's pleasant, maybe it's changing. Definitely it's changing, but your relationship with it can soften. No demand. Play with it for a minute. In this spot of the body, or in this center of experience, or somewhere else. See how it impacts your heart, your being, how it impacts the experience. whatever it is. Your sensitivity, the aliveness, the lightness of your attention can really be there. And with this intention to make peace with experience in this way, reducing any demand of the experience. Unsatisfactory, you can say. I'm not investing, not pushing and pulling, assuming or attempting that this or that will fit how I want it to be. So the letting be aspect here is prominent, however it is. You can even notice that it kind of does its own thing, that it has its own life, that are not completely in your control. If it feels right, of course, you can open your attention to the whole body with this same approach. So letting the heart and mind perceive the sense of the whole body. This whole field of experience of different densities and streams and vibrations. Opening to it and also noticing the changing nature of it. It moves so much, changes so much. The change may be fast and slow or slow. You don't need to make it quicker, but you can notice it changing. This happens, then that happens. Things are becoming a little bit more pleasant, a little bit less pleasant. The Vedana of things is changing as well. And from here it can be a little bit natural to take the stance of, yes, unsatisfactory. I cannot actually count on it. To deliver what I want. It's changing, it's moving. And notice that this is not a retreat of your sensitivity and interest. You can really be there. Sensitive to how it feels to experience the world, in this case, perhaps the body, with a little bit less of a demand. removing the pressure from the world to behave as you want it to. Let's sit with this in silence for a few minutes. Of course, you can let your mind expand further. Touch and receive sounds and impressions from the outside, a whole landscape of experience there. And you can play between focusing on one thing, let's say one sound, one impression of the outside world, holding this same approach, unsatisfactory, not meant to satisfy me. Rob sometimes calls this approach, or says that this approach leads to a kind of holy disinterest. It's not a disinterest that pushes things away or that is kind of bored by them, but it's a disinterest that releases them, frees them from your pressure on them, and frees you from that kind of pressure. And with the removal of the pressure, the world reveals itself differently, much more open and interesting than one may assume. So you can do that with one experience, notice how that feels. You can expand the attention and do it with the sense of all experience. And of course, in time, it may be natural to include thoughts and movements of mind as well. Insatisfactory. And with this, you can relax your meditative intentions and the meditative posture. If you want and when you want, you can invite your eyes to open as well. Thank you for your practice.
Today's podcast is an offering to you from our archive of freely available live daily classes. We make wisdom teachings and meditations as freely available as possible to as many people as wish to practice. You can help ensure we can continue to support a worldwide Sangha by leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts, by sharing this with someone who'd be interested, and by offering a small financial support at sangha.live/donate.